This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen, your host. Since 2010, we've been broadcasting sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world. I invite you to listen and change how you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where we will be deciphering AI, debunking snake oil, and finding the truth. My guest today is Sayash Kapoor, who is a senior fellow at Mozilla, a Lawrence S. Rockefeller Fellow at the Princeton University for Human Values, and a PhD candidate in computer science at Princeton University's Center for Information Technology Policy. He is the co-author of AI Snake Oil, named one of Nature's 10 best books of 2024. Sayash, thank you so much for joining me today about a very important conversation, I think.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's talk about misconceptions with regards to AI or artificial intelligence.
I would say that the biggest misconception about AI is that it refers to a singular piece of technology. But in reality, AI is more of an umbrella term. It has some similarities. All of these different applications have some similarities, but they are more different than they are similar under the hood. But this fact is not appreciated by the consumers of the technology, and that really leads to a lot of confusion.
And as consumers of the technology, AI has been around for quite a long time. This is not new technology. This is decades old, 50, 60 years old?
Yes, exactly. 80 years old at this point.
Oh, really? 80?
Uh-huh.
Wow. Okay. Older than I thought. So we've been using it. As humans, we have adapted to AI technology in many ways. And why so much fear around AI today?
I think there's a joke in the AI community that goes, as soon as something starts working reliably, it stops being called AI. And so anytime we sort of build something that works well, let's say the filters that filter spam emails from coming in your inbox, we stopped thinking of it as AI. A few decades ago, this would be an example of state-of-the-art AI. But when it comes to AI, we seem to only focus on the cutting edge, on applications that we are still building, perhaps applications that have some troubling societal impacts. And we don't look at other aspects of AI that can and do work well. In many ways, we interact with these systems hundreds of times every single day.
And not even realizing it.
Exactly.
Because the experience is fairly seamless when it works well.
Absolutely. And I think this is the type of AI we should have more of.
Yes.
We want systems that work reliably rather than systems that sort of displace labor, systems that displace occupations. And I think that's what the struggle with this modern wave of AI is really about.
Well, when you think about, you mentioned the displacement of labor. When we look at healthcare, for example, right, that you can have scans, you can have medical testing that is then reviewed through AI. It doesn't replace, but it augments the specialist who is also reviewing and double checking. So you have cross-referencing, which only makes those results more secure and real.
Absolutely. And I think one of the major limitations of today's AI is that it might work well at a task, let's say 90% of the times, but it isn't reliable enough to do that task perfectly 100% of the times.
Is a human?
I think because we realize these limitations that human beings have too, I think that's why we came up with institutions. So we don't really have like a single sort of doctor making every single decision about you. We have second opinions.
Right.
Doctors are bound by moral codes. And I think that's what we need to come up with, these alternative institutions to incorporate AI.
Let's talk a little bit about morality or the moral code within AI as a technology itself, and then the way people use AI.
So one of the challenging moral problems with today's AI systems is that they require a lot of text to be labeled. For example, we want to label content that might conflict with the developer's wishes for how an AI system works. We don't want AI systems to output hate speech. We don't want AI systems to output abusive materials and so on. And the way we do this is by having humans look at vast hordes of text that actually do represent hate speech, that do represent abusive materials. And I think that presents one of the biggest moral conundrums, simply because these workers are often outside the US, outside the West. They are paid very little, pennies for the dollar compared to what AI developers make. And they're required to go through harrowing content day after day, week after week, the psychological tolls of which cannot be overstated.
Interesting. And the code of conduct or morality in the AI space is not universal, is it?
Not at all. So I think different developers have different norms that they want their systems to adhere to. As one recent example, a Chinese company called DeepSeek R1 released its latest model, which was very differently morally aligned compared to its American counterparts. So there were many things that American companies' AI models wouldn't say or do, which this model would happily go on to do. For example, outputting content related to various safety filters. It would give you directions for how to build bioweapons, for example.
Wow.
On the other hand, there were some things this model wouldn't do that American companies would do, which is, let's say, talk about Xi Jinping. Every time a user even asks a question about the authoritarian ruler, the model would fail to answer or stop answering right then and there.
That's fascinating. There was an article in the New York Times recently, and it was also an Audible article about a woman who went to another country for her nursing degree. I don't know if you know this story. And she basically used ChatGPT to become her boyfriend.
Oh, wow.
And she developed a relationship with her bot that had a name. His name was Leo. And then the relationship, I guess it would only have so many cycles, and the chatbot would only remember a certain amount of her data, at which point she'd have to start all over and basically retrain the bot in her voice.
I do remember reading this.
Yes, it was fascinating to me. I was like, wow. And she said it violated the norms of ChatGPT, that she was able to do a workaround because she learned some way to do it on a TikTok video.
That's amazing. And actually, at this point, we also have services that sell this specific product. So there's this service called Replica that allows you to chat with like your virtual boyfriend or girlfriend. And the users of Replica often report spending a dozen plus hours every single day talking to their virtual boyfriend or girlfriend.
Wow, that's incredible. It really is limitless. And is that a good or a bad thing? Which I guess goes into the moral conversation once again.
Exactly. And I think one of the sort of downsides of this rush to productionize AI systems is that developers aren't incentivized either by the companies or the venture capitalist firms who are funding them, or because of regulations from policymakers. They aren't incentivized to sort of stop and consider these moral risks. And there is a rush to productionize these models, which I think could end up being counterproductive. So I remember this instance once where Replica changed the behaviors of their bots. And there was a big outroar because people who were relying on these bots for emotional support could basically no longer have certain conversations with these bots.
And the argument for these bots in strengthening people's ability to engage in social relationships, if they had social anxiety or found it very hard to connect with others, that these bots could act as surrogates that would strengthen and teach them how to go out into the world and engage. So I can see the vice virtue, right, of the technology.
Absolutely. And I do think, to be clear, that it could be extremely useful. It's just the lack of care in terms of either treating this as an experiment and figuring out whether this really works well, doing some academic studies on how the users were affected, either in the short or the long term. I think this sort of experimentation really is necessary to understand
Yes.
the impacts of this technology.
Wow. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the societal impacts. Let's talk about the hype around AI, these extreme claims of what it can do or what it shouldn't do or what it might do.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest sources of hype that we've seen in the last couple of years is people who claim that AI will basically kill us all. We've had several prominent people in the AI community sign open letters that say that we shouldn't be training AI models that are more capable than the ones we already have, lest we lose control over these models and risk the collapse of civilizations. Now, this might sound like a critique of AI, but I think it serves a function of hyping up what today's AI is capable of doing.
So overselling, you're saying?
Exactly. And I think this sort of is both in contrast to the real limitations and the real shortcomings of AI, such as the lack of reliability or the fact that we have still not figured out how to deal with the labor issues that AI creates. And I think it also sort of oversells what AI can do. It positions it as this sort of thing from the science fiction cinema, like the Terminator, that it can sort of do all sorts of things much better than humans can, which is also not the case.
Yeah. Let's take a pause. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with my guest today, Sayash Kapoor, who is the co-author of AI Snake Oil: What Artificial Intelligence Can Do, What It Can't, and How to Tell the Difference. To learn more, please go to Sayash Kapoor at Princeton University. You can find him there. On X, he's at Sayash K, and on LinkedIn, also Sayash Kapoor. Here comes the pause. I'll be right back. Wait. Before we take that break, I want to talk about the power of a pretty nest. I started my professional life in architecture and design. Living in an aesthetically pleasing environment matters a lot to me. Beautiful spaces make me happy, and that's why I am a loyal fan and customer of Quince Home Goods. I am super excited that Quince has branched out from apparel to home decor. Find everything you need to upgrade your home with elevated design and affordable linens, towels, cookware, cutlery, kitchen tools, curtains, furniture, rugs, and so much more. The best part? Like Quince's clothing, their home goods are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering with top artisans, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. With the world feeling chaotic lately, I've been focused on creating a calm home, and Quince makes that easy with simple, well-designed decor that brings a sense of peace and balance to my house, all without overspending. These items have elevated my dining table design and made my guests gleeful to drink from attractive tumblers and cut their food with designer knives that can actually cut. Not only does Quince deliver on style, quality, and price, Quince smokes other high-end home brands without breaking the bank. Refresh your space with elevated home essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/HHTR for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/HHTR to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/HHTR. Now let's take that pause. We'll be right back. Harvesting Happiness is rooted in science. Our work facilitates applied positive psychology practices through media and consulting. We're committed to sound ideas for better well-being, leading to increased life satisfaction and a better world for everyone. We're not into pseudoscience or quick fixes. We're focused on common sense backed by rigorous research. Healthy critical thinking is the foundation for our discussions. We encourage you to challenge preconceptions and explore ideas with a curiously discerning mind. Collaboration with our guests is united by an inclusive vision to boost resilience, critical thinking, communication, and problem solving through civilized discourse and pleasurable relational engagement for everyone. Each day, we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable, regardless of external circumstances. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek support because good psychological health is vital to the achievement of a healthy and satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial and educational services that boost emotional and social intelligence. And we're back, continuing the conversation with Sayash Kapoor, deciphering AI, debunking snake oil, and finding the truth. Let's get back to it. So, Sayash, we were talking a little bit about the dangers of the hype in terms of extreme claims about AI. I'd love now to turn the conversation to the consumer learning to spot false claims or red flags in AI marketing.
So one of the areas where we've seen a lot of false claims when it comes to the use of AI is when developers claim that AI can be used to predict certain outcomes about people. And on this basis, you can make consequential decisions about these people's lives, whether it is in healthcare or in finance, in insurance, in education, even in criminal justice. We are seeing AI systems that are used to make predictions, such as whether a defendant, let's say in a courtroom, will reappear on the date of the trial, and on this basis, reject or give them bail. And I think this is the sort of system that we've seen a lot of red flags with. Over and over again, we've seen these systems fail in the real world.
I was reading an article recently about healthcare claims being rejected because it was being put through AI programming, and the AI was doing the judgment, the quantitative and qualitative analysis of the claim. It wasn't a human, right? So, and people were getting denied benefits that they should have been given.
That's exactly right. I mean, most prominent healthcare companies today use some sort of AI system to make these determinations. And to be clear, I think the misincentive here is not coming from the AI models themselves, but rather from the companies who are incentivized to deny as many patients or as many claims as possible. In one case, there was a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit against United Health, where for the very small percentage of claims that are later appealed, it was found that 90% of these claims were reversed. So in 90% of the very small percentage of cases which did go on to be appealed, it turned out that the AI system had made the wrong determination.
I have an experience with that, a direct experience with United Health. I have an elder uncle who is a subscriber to United Health. He broke his hip and needed a valve replacement within 2 days of each other. And he was denied benefits to go to a skilled nursing facility for rehab because he needed to learn how to walk again. And I appealed on his behalf and won. It's crazy, you know? Didn't make sense why he was denied, right? Like an 86-year-old person who can't walk, lives alone, has no supports in the house.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this seems to be the norm rather than the exception. So we've heard other horror stories like, sending people who've had major surgery, who are also elderly, out of the hospital when they're unable to walk by themselves.
Right? They can't walk 10 feet. They can't go to the bathroom by themselves, but yet they should go home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fascinating. What about like banking and finance? Let's say for analyzing home loan applications or university applications in the academic environment, right? What about that? Are they used in that way?
Unfortunately, we've seen examples of predictive AI, that is AI that's used to make these predictions about the future in all of these domains. So in banking, one of the most prominent examples is this startup called Upstart. It basically tries to look at people's data from where they graduated, what their grades were, it looks at 1,600 different data points about a person to make these decisions, whether or not the bank should grant a loan to someone.
Wow.
And you can easily imagine that many of these data points are correlated with things like people's race, their backgrounds, their family wealth, and so on. So intentionally or unintentionally, these systems do tend to reinforce the existing hierarchies in society.
Wow. Let's talk about practical skepticism for the consumer. How should we approach AI, the use of AI within our own lives?
I think there are a few rules of thumb that can be helpful. The first is anytime you see AI tools claiming to predict the future, your level of skepticism should be really high. We are able to predict the future to some extent for a narrow set of applications, things like predicting the weather. We can do that a few days out. But as soon as human beings are involved, the equation changes drastically. We have inherent limits to the predictability of people's life outcomes. And so if anyone is claiming to sell you something that can predict how a human would behave, whether they're suited for a job or a university, that is very likely to be an application that doesn't work very well.
And what about our daily use of, let's say, ChatGPT or any one of these other programs for just consumer use?
I think one of the best things about programs like ChatGPT is simply that these state-of-the-art programs are available to basically everyone at little to no cost.
Yes.
So unlike predictive AI, AI that claims to predict the future, which is basically sold more secretively to organizations or businesses, generative AI, which is AI like ChatGPT, is broadly available to consumers. One of the things I like to say is it's always best to test out these systems in areas where you're already an expert, because that's when you can best understand the limitations of these tools. If you ask questions about things you don't know the answer to, then it's very easy to come away impressed, even if the system makes mistakes.
Yeah, don't write your college papers using ChatGPT.
Absolutely not.
I mean, your citations will not be correct. I mean, they're, user beware, right?
Absolutely.
We shouldn't place our trust in these things. They're great as idea starters,
And we have seen examples of these systems go horribly awry in the real world. So in one case we've seen is the use of ChatGPT for generating legal citations. Many lawyers have started to use these systems, and many of them have been caught. At this point, I think we've had over a dozen cases of lawyers who were using ChatGPT or another language model in order to come up with citations. And they were later caught and then reprimanded by the judges. Yeah. In some cases, they were fined. In other cases, they were disbarred from the next few cases or for a certain period of time. And so we've seen career-altering consequences for many lawyers.
Well, here's a moral dilemma with that. If you're using a sophisticated model to do the research to get the citations and then checking the citations, are you bypassing what would typically be a clerk's role and using the platform to do that work? And is that wrong? If you're verifying, and properly citing.
So I do think, verification is essential for any of these uses of ChatGPT. These models make stuff up all the time. That said, I think instead of looking at it as a zero-sum game where, it's either the AI system or a paralegal, I think it can be more productive to look at it as enhancing the productivity of paralegals who are already working at law firms, who are now able to process many times more cases compared to the volume of cases they were able to handle before.
And it's very helpful for organizing outlines. I think it's great.
Absolutely. As a programmer, I think generative AI is game-changing. Yeah. So I use these models actually at this point to basically write the first draft of every single line of code that I write for my job.
Wow.
I know a lot of people who do the same. And of course, you do need to be an expert already to do some of this, especially because errors can creep in. But it enhances productivity significantly over typing out the entire code yourself.
Well, and certainly if you're using it for other writing applications to sort of help structure and organize, and then you go back and personalize and refine and put in your own hard work. It's not a substitute for your own sweat equity, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think different people have different tolerances, and that's completely fine for how much AI generated content they use for various tasks. For example, for me personally, I'm completely fine using it for programming, but I haven't found it good enough for a lot of the actual writing that I have to do. It's great for brainstorming, it's great for
Yes.
creative discussions, but it just does not cut it when it comes to doing the final draft.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Let's talk about some failures, some case studies where AI did not live up to its promises.
So one of my favorite examples is from hiring automation companies. HR companies and HR departments at companies these days are quite bottlenecked. There are many more times applications than they can review. And in this sort of scheme of things, AI is promised as a silver bullet. So these AI tools claim to automatically interview job candidates and select, let's say, the top 10 candidates for any position. Usually, we don't have access to the internals of these tools. But in one case, this German investigative journalism outlet did get access to a tool called Retorio. And what they found was that if you simply change what's in the background of your video interview, let's say you add a bookshelf to the background, your scores increase dramatically. And so this might actually have been the case on the data that was used to train these models. People with bookshelves might have done better.
Yep.
But for the same person conducting the same interview, I think it just shows how brittle these systems are.
That's fascinating. And it should be noted that Sayash is sitting without bookcases behind his background. I'm being silly. That's being silly. Let's talk about the impact on well-being, because I think that there's a good discussion here. On the one hand, it streamlines and it's more efficient. And on the other hand, the downside is what?
So I think one of the downsides is definitely an increase in sort of spam content. So oftentimes I've heard and seen articles on Facebook that are basically essentially spam. They are created using AI, but the substance of the articles is meaningless compared to if a human wrote it. Yeah. And so we're seeing the information environment sort of degrading over time. And even when it comes to AI companions, I think we don't yet know all of the risks of long-term reliance on AI companions for people's psychological health and mental health. And I think that is an area that needs urgent work.
Yeah, that is interesting. Does the relationship grow with time, the level of trust? And there is no reciprocity, but does the AI model, can it learn reciprocity in how it speaks to the human?
And one thing I'm especially concerned about is children using these models, specifically because I think they haven't yet fully developed, so they might not know the stopping points for such engagements. They might end up spending a lot more time and might be much more adversely affected compared to adults using this in a fully knowing way.
Well, that's a good point, because their brains are not yet fully developed, right? So the executive functioning is not there. And we know that when the brain is young, it's very, very spongy, right? And easily impressionable. And it might not learn all the social and emotional skills required to engage with humanity.
Exactly. And I think we also risk repeating the same mistakes we made with social media when it comes to regulating the use of these technologies. So in social media, US policymakers had extremely strict rules for social media applications that were targeted to preteens, so people below the age of 13. But what this meant in practice was that preteens would basically sign up by lying about their ages.
Of course.
So we had no tools that would improve the ability of these systems to function well. We had no tools to protect children when they used such platforms. And at the same time, we did have preteens signing on and using these systems.
No guardrails, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we're looking at a very different world today as a result of that, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that stands out in both AI and social media is the lack of focus on our scientific understanding on how social media or AI affects kids and how we can do better when it comes to AI, where we perhaps missed the boat when it came to social media.
We are out of time, and I am so grateful that you could come today and spend some time educating us. Your book, which you have co-authored, is AI Snake Oil, What Artificial Intelligence Can Do, What It Can't, and How to Tell the Difference. My guest today has been Sayash Kapoor. You can connect with him on X at Sayash K, on LinkedIn at Sayash Kapoor, and the website at Princeton University. That is www.cs.princeton.edu. And look up Sayash K there. Thank you so much, Sayash. I really appreciate you spending part of your day with me.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers Kamen on behalf of my guest, Sayash Kapoor, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day, and remember to be kind to one another. Want to explore more sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content at More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness on Substack and Medium. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by Lisa Cypers Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the excellent team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.